but the big news of the day, Chris McIntosh meeting with reporters earlier to, I guess, explain why Luke Fickell will be back in 2026. And Jim Polzin, BadgerExtra, nice enough to join us on short notice today. So, Jim, let's start with this. Am I framing that correctly? That's what today was, right? Like McIntosh gathered around and said, all right, Fickell's going to be back. Here's why. Because obviously we haven't really seen much to make us think that would be a good idea. So he explained it today, right?
He explained it in separate interviews, right? Like he was doing all this separately. Colton Bartholomew was there for our outlet. The Journal Sentinel had a separate interview. Jesse Temple from Badger Connect had an interview, and apparently ESPN had one too. So at least 4 separate outlets. So very busy day for Chris McIntosh to kind of tell us, I think what we assumed all along, right? Like lately, all the breadcrumbs have been Luke Fickell will be back. I think he just thought it was important to make that absolutely clear to everyone.
Do you think he communicated anything that was new or novel today that was necessary to explain? Like, do you think we're in a more understanding place now? Like, was this whole exercise necessary today, or did it accomplish anything?
Was it necessary? Let me answer. I think there's 2 separate answers there. I think I can see why he thought it was necessary. I think Chris McIntosh is talking to recruits, and certainly the coaches are talking to recruits, and existing players want to know, is this guy going to be back? And if he's telling them yes behind the scenes, I think it's important to get that message out to your fans. Certainly, I think I can understand why you do this. Did what he say, was it impactful in any way? Is it something that's going to change fans' minds? I think no. It's certainly nothing he said today changed my mind. He didn't say anything out of the ordinary. He admitted there's problems. They've identified those problems. I don't think he really got into, at least with us, how exactly they're going to fix those problems besides throw money at them. How much money? He didn't say, right? That's where I'd like a little bit more transparency. So, I think my answer to that is yes and no. Like, I think getting out ahead of this and making it clear, it ends any speculation. So do that. Does it provide clarity beyond that? No.
I think most fans would have bet on Fickell being back at this point, so that's not a shock. And I think most fans would agree there needs to be a higher level of investment. So I don't think the meat and potatoes of what was said or what was announced today was against the expectation of many Badgers fans. What Zach has talked about so often on our network and on all of our shows is I don't think Badgers fans want to hear it from these guys. I don't know that it's the sales pitch that people aren't buying. I think it's the salesmen. These people look at McIntosh and said, why should we believe that you're going to be able to execute this stuff? Or Fickell, right, in a different lane. Like, I don't think it's a sales pitch. I think it's the salesman. And I don't think I'm talking out of school as like a microphone warrior, because Zach and Jesse have talked about that on our platforms now for weeks.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. I think one thing that could end up happening at some point is that they hire somebody, a football czar, if you will. They already have a football GM, but maybe there's a role above that GM that works alongside McIntosh. And, if they do that, it would be wise to get someone in there that can be kind of the glad hander with the donors, the guy that fans look to and are inspired by. If they do that, I think that helps. Again, none of this really matters if you don't improve the product on the field, right, Grant? Like you've got to do that. And it feels just in watching this team right now that it's so far away from getting to that point that it's hard to envision.
Well, and this is what I struggle with Fickell. I don't think Fickell's a bad coach. I'm watching this from a million miles away. I think he had a misunderstanding of the job that he was taking, and he made some missteps. Yeah. And he has not been able to correct those missteps over the course of, let's say, 2 years, like his second, and we're partially through his third year now. And I don't watch them on Saturdays and think, man, if they just had a little money, like for a long time we watch them and said, if they could just have a quarterback, because they're so good at everything else. And I think spiritually, if the same was true now and we watch them, the culture, they play hard, they're well coached, they're well organized, all that, and they just needed money, that would be one thing. I think it's a lot more than money, and I don't know that Luke Fickell is going to get in a lab. We have no reason to think he's going to get in a lab this offseason and come back with some brilliant plan on all of a sudden how to coach Wisconsin in the Big Ten. I think that's the concern of many fans.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, you look at some of his decisions. He hired Phil Longo, and clearly that was a mistake. He admitted as much by firing him deep into his second season. The defense has been essentially a different shape and form every season. They go through a season, they make adjustments on what type of player they want, and we're now on year 3 of that. And even now, that you wouldn't call the defense great by any means, right? So there have been things that go beyond wins and losses that just kind of you start to question in-game decisions, stuff like that. Like there is a lot of things that I can point to that go beyond the result on Saturday, and certainly the injury excuse, right? Like injuries have played a role. I don't want to discount that, but there's so much more than that goes into evaluating why the job he's done and why this program is where it is.
Okay, so the results on Saturday, we talked a little bit about that. I think another problem, and you would know this times 100, based on something that I would know, but you talk to people around the program or alums, or you just listen to people like JJ Watt, and you could just hear it and see it in his voice that this regime has maybe not done a great job connecting with people who matter in and around the program, to use Macintosh's phrase. Like, how do they get better at that stuff? Because it's clear that a lot of these relationships that are really important for this program have been kind of icy.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's something that I do think there's part of it where you're an outsider and you come in. What's that?
Well, it's a tough question to answer. So if that's not something, I guess, that you can speak to, I guess that's just something that I've noticed. So I would like your take on that.
No, I think it's a fair question. I just think that, you're now going to be year 4 of this, right? So it's you're behind. You're behind the 8 ball. You really need to. The relationships like this should have been started in year 1. If you're now doing this off season, you're playing from behind, and you're going to have to convince a lot of people that are upset, whether it's alumni, like you've mentioned, former letter winners, high school football coaches, right? Fans. Like, I just don't think he's done a great job. And again, like, all of that would be, if he was winning games, I don't think all that would be a big deal, but he's not winning games. And so you need as many allies as possible. And I just don't think he's done a great job of building allies.
So Jim Polzin is here, BadgerExtra. I have not had a chance to read everybody's story. I didn't, when I first knew this was going down and we're looking for stories and Pete Thamel broke it, I didn't know if it was a press conference. Is this going to be a thing that we can all watch and there's directed questions? It's all one-on-ones, like you said, which I didn't really know. At any point, did someone ask Chris, and this is a difficult question to ask him, I understand. Did someone ask him, hey, Chris, people might be concerned that your best interests in your job at this moment in time might not be aligned with the best interests of the program and the university? That's something that has to be talked about and asked, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I heard Colton Bartholomew's interview with Chris, and I thought Colton asked some really good questions. Did he ask that question specifically? No, I don't think so. I think that's a valid point. I think it goes above Chris McIntosh too. I would really like Jennifer Manukin to sit down with somebody, some outlet, and kind of explain where her mind is at. She's given out a couple statements. I don't think that's good enough. I think this situation has reached the point where it's bad, and a chancellor needs to speak for it. Why are you keeping this athletic director on? Give us the reasons besides being aligned and trusting him and stuff. I think the very question you just asked me about self-interest, Jennifer Manukin needs to answer that too, because she 15 months ago, she gave Chris McIntosh a raise and a contract extension and really kind of pushed her chips in the center of the table. Probably not knowing that it was going to be this bad 15 months later.
Is she involved at a level that's greater or lesser than maybe previous people who have done her job? Give us a little bit of an understanding of exactly how involved she is.
No, great question. And Colton did ask that today, because I think the outsider's view is that she's not involved and she's very hands off. And Chris McIntosh told Colton that she's I believe the phrase was the alignment has been better than at any time in his time at UW, and maybe in talking to people, it's been a long time. I mean, I don't know, since Shalala Richter Alvarez, equaling that alignment, I'm not sure anybody will ever get to that point, but I don't know how aligned Barry was with his chancellors. And if Chris is saying that, it's certainly food for thought. Now, is he going to rip his chancellor in front of the media? Also, no. So everything, all these people in power say needs to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Of course. And I understand that as well, right? You're not going to air this out in public. I don't know that a lot of people have a good understanding of the way that she is wired. Is she too hands-on? Is she just passive? And it's just another thing on a very, full schedule and a full plate for a chancellor. I think a lot of people lack an understanding there. And if she doesn't talk, right, or if she doesn't do any interviews, that's a little bit on her as well. Your column is out an hour ago, BadgerExtra, and I love the concept. You said, can one person be Don Morton and Barry Alvarez at the same time? And what you're writing is Chris McIntosh obviously believes that Luke Fickell can do that. Otherwise, he would be gone, right? So talk about that and give us a taste of what we can find with your work as of today.
First of all, I need to credit Colton Bartholomew for that idea because, a columnist is only as good as his beat writer. And in many conversations with Colton over weeks and months, he comes up with some column ideas, and that was one of them. The gist of it is that whether you blame Paul Chryst for any of this or not, I think any realistic person says that this program has gone backwards since Luke Fickell got the job.
Mm-hmm.
He's taken it to almost Morton-esque levels. Not quite there, but we're getting, a lot of the stats and facts I look up now are entering Don Morton late 80s territory. The guy who fixed the Morton problem was Barry Alvarez. So I really think that they need somebody. They're in a hole right now that they haven't been in 35 years, and they need somebody that is Alvarez-esque to get them out of it. And that guy apparently for another year will be Luke Fickell. Much different time. Like let's acknowledge that up front, Grant, right? Like these are different times, and there's a transfer portal. In some ways, it's easier to go build a roster. In some ways, it's harder because you're competing with other schools and money and all that stuff. But I think the bottom line is Chris McIntosh has decided to double down on his decision from 3 years ago.
This is going to be very interesting to watch it play out. And I really wish we had a crystal ball and we could know, all right, 1 year at this time, what's going to be happening? Because I think Go ahead. Talk about that.
No, I mean, it's funny you say that because I had a line in my column about that. Like, mark the calendar, November 6th, 2026. Where are we? If you're asking me, it's hard for me to see this program being much better off. It might be trending slightly upward. I think for me, Grant, if this program, if these guys are 6-6 next year, what does that really mean, right? If they're 6-6 in year 4, I think that will convince people like Chris McIntosh and Jennifer Manukin that the trend is going in the right direction. But if you ask any fans, 6-6 in year 4 of a regime that was basically promised contending for championships would be an absolute failure, right? Especially when you consider what happened in year 3 and year 2. So I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball. I did point out in that column that if Chris McIntosh is correct, if he got this right and this is turned around in a year, a lot of people owe him an apology, and I will be right there in the front of the line because I've certainly been critical about it.
Well, and I think the concern for many is it's clearly not happening with McIntosh and Fickell, and the longer you drag this out, the program is only going to be in a worse spot, and then you're going to have to make the change anyways. And I think that's the fear of many, and they have plenty of evidence to back that fear up, right? It's not like people are being hysterical when they think that way. So, and if it does turn around, again, credit to them in a year or whenever that happens.
Yeah, Grant, and this really goes back to something. I mean, I wrote this after the Maryland game. It was obvious at that point that Manukin is in a jam a little bit, right? You cannot fire Fickell and McIntosh at the same time. That timing just, it doesn't work out. You can't have a new coach being hired when there's no athletic director. So you really need to decide one or the other, and they chose neither, which is fine. But getting the timing right here is tricky because maybe they decide at some point to fire Luke Fickell. I don't know if I'm the next coach, if I want to come in, if I don't know the athletic director is on solid ground, right? And so it's just, it's a mess. It's a complicated mess is kind of how I put it after the Maryland game, and it's only gotten worse since then. It's gotten
much worse, which after the Maryland game, I don't know if it would have been hard to believe, but I certainly would have not to like to hear that after the Maryland game. Jim, I've kept you too long. Thank you so much. We'll find your work at BadgerExtra, and wherever this season goes, maybe we'll link up again. Thank you for the time.
Yeah. Thanks, Grant. Appreciate it.